Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursday, April 28th. It's almost May. It's my birthday in May. It's nice. We're on the MSP Initiative live, coming to you, from, I'm always based here outside of Philadelphia, and we have a special guest on for the first time today. We'll let him talk about himself in a second. But we'd like to go through some housekeeping, just to get some things out of the way so that we don't have to remember to go back later and talk about it. So we are mspinitiative.com. You can find this session and every other session in both podcast and video format. We do these twice a week. It goes back to March 2020. Lots of good stuff there. Keep an eye out for our community block party page. We love these. I'm sure some of you have been to these before in the past. We have 3 in the books at least coming in here towards in the latter part of the year. We'll be announcing those soon. Just keep an eye out, but all of our past block party stuff's here. And then what's happening kind of now is Channel Strong. So we're going into week 3 of Channel Strong. If you haven't realized it, it's like an outdoor tailgate style, informal networking, education, beers, sandwiches kind of thing. We're going to be in Chicago, Grand Rapids, Indianapolis, Lexington, Kentucky, Nashville, Tennessee, May 16th through the 20th. So just go to channelstrongtour.com. And if you are an MSP, definitely throw your name in the form and we will make sure that you get an invite. And that is all for now. We'll bring up some other topics later on in the show. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Brian from MSP Growth Hacks. Hi, Brian.
Hey, man.
How you doing?
I'm living the dream. I should mention I came to you via MSP Growth Hacks.
Okay. That
is, however, not my company.
Okay. What's your company?
Yeah, I'm with Feel Good MSP.
Feel Good MSP. So let's back up for a second. Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about your background in the technology space so that people can get to learn a little bit more about you, and then we'll learn for a couple seconds what Feel Good MSP. I love Feel Good, by the way. Who doesn't like to feel good? I think everybody likes Feel Good. We'll learn a little bit about that and we'll go from there.
Great. Well, I'll say my experience in tech came through, it was sort of a thought experiment. So I've been in sales for like 12 years, and I took a job sort of as a VP of sales for a managed service provider, having had no tech experience. Actually, that's not true. I once temped as a help desk for Carl's Jr. Northwest, archiving emails. So I have done tier 1 before, and when I realized tier 1 is just Googling stuff, I said, wow, anybody can do this. That was my IT experience. But I came to an MSP with no sales experience, with the task of growing that business. And in 3 years, we went from 600-something thousand to over 2 million in ARR, with no marketing budget. I had to essentially cash flow my own efforts. And I did that until 2020. And then in 2020, unrelated to the pandemic, is when I stepped out and started my company, the Feel Good MSP.
Okay, so that's interesting. I would say a lot of people are at different journeys in their company maturity levels, and some people have full-blown sales teams. Some people may be hiring their first salesperson for the first time. Some people are in between. So you basically had like this much experience from a managed services standpoint, and you took this like head of sales for a managed services company. How did you know what you were selling?
Right. Excuse me. Well, that's an interesting question. I have this theory that if you understand the philosophy of sales, you can pivot pretty quickly to sell anything. But when you're used to selling B2B, I mean, what is sales? Sales is a communication tactic. It's a communication methodology where you connect a problem that someone has with a solution that someone else has. That's it.
Fair.
And so if you know how to identify, discover pain, quantify the pain, sit within the pain with the prospect, and then talk about what their options are, then you can sell it. But I mean, my first day, I sat in the office and they're like, okay, let's sell some VoIP. We had our own VoIP platform that we built, and we had our own data center presence. So it was like major margin, boutique.
What market were you
at? In Southern California, in the Inland Empire.
Okay. So there's a lot of guys down there, right? I mean,
I mean, there's a lot of MSPs, but there's 13 million people in LA County. They all need phones, you know?
I
But yeah,
got
the
you.
first day they're like, okay, let's sell some VoIP. And I said, great, what's VoIP? You know? Um, Keith
Yeah,
says he's in the Empire.
Keith's in that area kind of. He loves, he loves to be all. We'll unmute him. He'll tell you, he's from that SoCal area.
Cool.
So were you the only person doing sales when you got picked up, or were you able to put people underneath of you as part of a sales team?
Yeah, I started with we were calling him a sales intern, who was a tech who was having some major health issues and unfortunately just like couldn't do his job, but he was running a big network as a tier 2 guy and he had no sales experience. Okay. His last name was Brainerd and he sounded like his last name was Brainerd, you know? um, but I taught him how to sell and then he started making 100 dials a day for me. And
It's interesting. Where did you come up with that number, $100 a day?
that's what I had done in the past. I knew that that's a number that's aggressive, but it's also really not that hard. And that number ultimately came from, try not to answer that with a long answer. I have a calls per consultation metric. I know how many calls it takes me to get a consult. I know how many consults it takes me to get a customer. I wanted a customer or two a month, which meant I needed 500 dials a week. So that's what we did.
So $500 a week means 2,000 calls a month, and you wanted to net 2 new accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I hope those were big accounts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we did a lot. You know, in our first 18 months, me figuring out what an MSP was, him figuring out what a phone was. We did like 25K MRR. As a part of that was cannibalizing a lot of our existing kind of customers that were not paying enough, cannibalizing a lot of our break fix and hybrid efforts that weren't scalable, and in a lot of ways restructuring our service offering. We kind of rebuilt our stack a couple of times to figure out like how do we sell a lot of this, and we did.
What were so curious now? You got my mind turning in a couple of areas. What were the things that you felt weren't scalable that you had to replace?
Yeah, well, I tried. First, the number one biggest mistake I made was I tried selling like a hybrid MSP where when people didn't have the budget or didn't want to buy an MSP contract, they wanted to stay with breakfix. I would say, well, how about this? I'll put in some of the core sort of visibility services for you at a low monthly fee with a reduced hourly rate in exchange. And it was just a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake for us. First of all, we didn't have our PSA really implemented yet, so it was really difficult to track. But ultimately, what we were doing was trapping ourselves into a downsell that was a lot more labor intensive. So you can't, anybody who knows this, it's like you need a revenue per employee metric so that you can hire more technicians, right? But when you can't predict your revenue, you can't project your next hire, which means it becomes very different to project what your utilization thresholds need to be before you start prepping to train another person or et cetera. It just was so difficult because we grew fast, and you can't grow fast when you're selling a piecemeal service offering, where you make it completely different every time.
So you had a bunch of existing accounts that you went back to and tried to pitch like a new service offering. What was your conversion on the existing accounts to get over from what they were on to what you were trying to sell them?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did that sort of on a slow burn. We had a lot of people who, when the owner started, he pumped his personal network, right, to start the business. And so it's like, yeah, that guy babysits my daughter. You can't fire, you can't do that. And so we had to do it kind of slow. So I don't have a clean answer to that. The metrics were looking like if I could go into a break fix customer, about 50% of the time they'd buy something fixed monthly. And then the ones who didn't, they would buy something later. But I would usually just make a pivot sell and sell them, keep them on VoIP, and then, try to host a server or something that's like a tangential service to start them out, and then ultimately come back in with an MSP contract later.
Okay, that's interesting. So really what you're, really the net new people were the things driving your whole agenda then.
100%. Yeah. We needed more customers. I called it my mountain of nickels strategy to start. because we had one client, which was 40% of our revenue.
Ooh.
And I said to my owner, this should scare you. And he said, yeah, it does. Because that means when we lose them, we lose 40% of our staff. And they knew it. So not only were they 40% of our revenue, when I put in all of our visibility, they were 90% of our tickets, which was really because we were under billing. We competed for a deal that was bigger than our standard ideal customer. And so they sold it before I got there at a way too low of a rate. Which, as a sidebar, I'll say that I coach a lot of MSPs, and I always hear these guys say, man, I'm just going to get this 350 user whale, and then all my problems will be solved. People who have 10, 20 customers saying that.
I think I've run into many MSPs who, like, the majority of their customers are like here, and then like they have like one or two customers over here, and like this customer is handled completely differently than everybody in this space.
Right.
And there's a lot of frustration on that one.
Always. Because when you do that, you're essentially committing to just be an employee for that company. If you don't believe me, try going on vacation and not answering them for a week. You'll have a panic attack because they're your boss. When they're all your revenue, they're your boss, and they dictate who you hire, what you do, when you eat lunch. They're in charge of you when you have one client that pays all your revenue. And so people say, I want to jump stratospheres into the next revenue tier by only closing one deal. And I said, if we do that, we're going to be in the same situation we're in now. So instead, I said, how much easier is it to move, $100,000 in $100 bills or nickels? If we have a mountain of nickels, if we take handfuls of nickels away, even if I lose a handful of clients, it won't matter because I have a bunch of them. So we went low, easy entry, like lower competitive, smaller, 5 to 10, really 15 users with a stick and spread model, right? Let's get in there and sell them something, and then we will sell them ancillary services over time, and then we'll do major projects. So we had standard like server renewals, and then after a year or two, we would migrate the server, colo it, whatever. So our lifetime value on these little customers ended up being per user way higher. So our margin was there, and then we've got 100 logos, all of which are growing incrementally and give you a stable foundation so that we don't have to worry about payroll, and we don't have to stay up at night worrying how we're going to keep everybody employed. So that was where we were. I wanted to de-risk our customer base and mature it a little bit. And then after that, we started. So at the beginning, that's why we only did 25K MRR in the first 18 months, because they were small logos. But then we started doing the 5, 6, 7K MRR deals once we had the foundation.
So you learn under fire, man. You got into the deep end and you had to really figure it out.
That's it.
Sometimes you just got to get your hands dirty. I'm sure everybody on here knows that. I love Keith's comment. He's like, or you can develop the system that their business runs on, and then you own them. Okay. I'm sure everybody would love to be in that situation. So why don't you give us a little idea of what your company does, and then we'll get into some current events.
Yeah, sure. It's my company called the Feel Good MSP. I'm a sales trainer and coach, but I essentially help MSPs create revenue ops and sales infrastructure. I have a 90-day program where I teach MSPs the sort of foundations of how to have a sales process that is standardized, that can work every single time, that attracts inbound leads. And I teach you how to close, then I teach you how to qualify, then I teach you how to open. Because a marketing process without a sales process is a vanity project, because you're not converting.
So you took all the things you learned in your run of running sales at an MSP in SoCal, and you said, here's what everybody needs to know, because I figured it out in a short period of time. Are you doing this?
Right. This is how you, with not that much money, if you don't have a huge marketing budget, but you have to get net new MRR every month, this is how you do it. So that's what I do. And then I run a workshop every single month where I deep dive into various topics. We just did a lead gen one where I talk about how to get 2 to 5 on-site consultations a month.
That's awesome. I love it. I mean, it's for all the people that have spent a lot of money in sales and marketing, hiring the wrong people. Maybe the marketing program just didn't fit your company and it didn't work. Whatever, right? There's a lot of reasons why things don't work. Nice to hear somebody had success. And it sounds like you kind of just got into the trench and did some digging, which is great. I mean, it almost sounds easy, but to each their own. I'm going to go ahead and give everybody the option to jump in. I just wanted Brian to give us a little bit of background and talk to us a little bit about what he knows and his background in the industry. So now you know a little bit more about Brian. Keith, what do you think about Brian's success in SoCal? Does that sound right to you, buddy?
I mean, it's a different market strategy than I use, but I think it works for startup guys and for people that think they're tech business guy, which I don't know if there's such a thing, by osmosis, and then they run out and need to learn, how to run a marketing campaign into business. I think a lot of people feel that there's a build it and they will come strategy to MSPs, hang a shingle and their doors will be knocked down. And I think they get surprised. Also, I think you guys made valid points on qualifying clients. Unless you're sticky, and you and I have talked about this a lot, George, unless you're sticky, you're at their beck and call. And consolidating all your eggs in one basket is just one way to be one cyber attack, one bad service, one anything away from losing half your company or more.
Well, I mean, Brian's point about, and listen, we've all heard this from the insurance people, from everybody that does any sort of business strategy, right? If you have one account that's the majority of your business, that's a problem zone, right? I mean, it just, people don't stay forever. We all know that. And when they do leave, then what do? Your business, like, you need to be working that entire time to be adding business through in order for that one customer to not really choke you, right? But I love your comment saying, "Hey, flip it around, right? If their operating system is something you built, then now they're really more relying on you than you're relying on them." You're in a unique situation there, Keith. A lot of MSPs, I think, are on the opposite of that.
Yeah, I've often said, in my opinion, for what we do, and this isn't for everybody, having development, doing business process engineering and re-engineering is the secret sauce. That's the part that the support contracts sit on top of that.
Yeah.
You cannot have our license unless you have our support contract. And you can't really operate without our license.
Yeah, I agree. I understand what you're saying. And you know what? At the end of the day, I think a lot of MSPs have started getting into building, cool things, cool scripts, cool widgets, cool, even full out SaaS products, right? And we've started to see, one of the things we'll talk about today in current events is an MSP who then acquired a SaaS company. It's a little bit different. We've heard of MSPs starting SaaS companies and then selling them, but I don't think we've heard of MSPs acquiring SaaS companies. And then, in the case of Electric, right? They value themselves as a SaaS company because they developed a lot of their own platform, and that's how they've gotten this really high kind of unicorn valuation, on their Series D. But they say they're an MSP, so different pieces, different ways, right? Not everybody gets to the same place at the same time. So,
by the way, I think there's that type of stickiness in cybersecurity, but that's maybe a different topic. I just had a client who I kind of said, let's go our own ways because you want stuff that doesn't match your size and what you pay us. And 3 weeks later, he called and said, my cyber insurance agent is canceling, my cyber insurance company is canceling me because our approval was based on your credentials and your service offering, not what the old trunk slam or whatever terms you guys use.
Whoa. Let's talk about that for a second, because that's real. Okay, so you helped. I remember you saying in the past that you were able to talk to somebody. I don't know if it's the underwriter, but like through the agent, through the insurance agent, broker, whatever, you had questions about their questionnaire that just didn't feel right, and you were able to talk to someone to get past these like black or white questions that don't fit, right? Hey, you have MFA on all of your network switches. What if the network switch is unmanaged? Stuff like that, right? So so you helped a customer obtain a cyber liability coverage, and then you parted ways with them after that coverage was, provided, invoked, the policies in place. And then you said that the insurance company pulled the policy and effectively canceled it on them after you were no longer in the picture.
Yeah, it was just a fluke. It was someone I know from the local Chamber of Commerce, and he just mentioned, how's XYZ who runs this facility for the city? How you guys doing? I said, oh, he didn't tell you. We parted ways. And he said, well, we're not going to honor the policy. He called and asked, he talked to their new provider, and the providers, he said, let me see your credentials. Let me see your history in cybersecurity. And the guy goes, well, no, I used to be a concierge at a hotel. I just kind of learned MSP by looking at computer screens. And he said, well, we made a lot of waiver. Basically, the insurance companies are finding their way. We all know that. They said, we made a lot of waivers to the standard policies based on this guy's experience and the high profile accounts he said, they secure. And so he said, can we get back together? And I said, probably not. And they pulled this policy.
Wow. That's crazy.
I think that's going to happen more often, personally, if you're involved with cultivating.
That's actually the first time I've heard of the policy being pulled in its term, midterm, because the person that was supporting them is no longer there. The company supporting them is no longer there.
Well, they couldn't meet when you start talking about the executive, do you have these components that we base the policy on? Do you have, a real SIM and SOC? Do you have expertise in these firewalls? I've told you before, in 85 or more percent of the forensic audits we do, there's not even any syslog monitoring. And most insurance companies are learning, that there's a large part of our industry that's unqualified.
I agree. Brian, as you've been consulting with MSPs, sounds like you do this on the regular now. How do you address this? I know you're more on the sales side, right? But there's also not advertising something that isn't true, right? Like, we don't want to, hey, I can do cybersecurity for you. Oh, but by the way, I don't really do it, right? Like, how do you recommend people approach that on the day-to-day?
Well, it is interesting. I would say that most MSPs are not really MSPs. Most MSPs who say, I'm a managed service provider, they are a break-fix company who started billing people monthly. Because the idea that an MSP who you're an MSP, but also we specialize in cybersecurity, I think that we need to let the novelty of cybersecurity wear off and just accept that if you are a managed service provider, you are a cybersecurity provider. Like, it is an inherent part of what we do that will never go away. So, like 18 months into COVID, people were still saying, this COVID thing. It's like, will you just stop saying that and just call it COVID? We know what it is. You know what I mean? It's not a mystery anymore. Like, cybersecurity is no longer a mystery. It's no longer, and I think the novelty of like trying to push your services by saying that you have a cybersecurity specialty, I think that that's going to wear off too. So what that essentially means is, if you're going to be a managed service provider, you have to just accept that cyber is a part of what it means today to be a managed service provider. And you have to then have a real cyber plan. That's this sort of, I'm trying not to tangent, but most cyber that I see MSPs use is they want to buy an agent, an endpoint system that will tell them when something happens, which is reactive in nature, meaning you're not actually providing cyber as a service. You're a VAR at best, right? They could go buy Blackpoint and SentinelOne, and if you're telling them that makes you a cyber as a service, you're not. I like the vendors. There's a new vendor called Fort Mesa who I've been really into, who's about actually creating checklists for getting people into alignment with the regulatory policies and doing so in a systematic way as a managed service provider, like weaponizing and monetizing your Slack hours towards kind of cyber checklists and being proactive. But yeah, obviously don't sell cyber if you're not selling cyber. But if you are an MSP and you don't have a real proactive cyber plan, stop what you're doing and figure it out now. Figure out what it means to sell cyber. Because like I'm saying, right now, it's so fun to talk about cyber, and everybody who has any certifications feels like they're really special, but soon it's not going to be special. Do you see what I mean? I actually think, for my sake, I don't want it to be special, because I would like us to just actually have really good holistic cyber solutions out there for everybody. That's some of my thought, but
I don't disagree with a lot of what you just said. If anything, like different people will go different routes to get to their end result. But the fact that, don't misrepresent yourself, but also be educated and also be transparent, on what you're doing and how you're helping your customer get to their end result, which is, hey, I'm not just waiting for a shoe to drop, right? Like, I know, like, there's all these words, right? Incident response and breach and this and that. Is like, these are all after something happens. Like, the whole idea here is to actually install a security practice. I'm not saying they're going to do it all on their own, but effectively assemble the people that are going to help the MSP ultimately get those pieces in place. And then they have to understand their part, and versus, the people behind them, right? So, right. It's a good point. Yeah. And yeah, it's probably time, right? I love how you said cybersecurity is, like, the novelty is wearing off. And like, so that if it's wearing off, that means that people are expecting that you're offering these services now, not not, hey, waiting for somebody to raise their hand and be like, oh yeah, I do that.
Right.
Or, it's the laws, especially in California. You have the laws of unscrupulous advantage that you are supposed to be an expert. That's what you're selling. And so I'm not suggesting that everyone go back to college and get a doctorate in cybersecurity. I'm saying stay in your lane. Yeah. At least have enough information that you can vet the proper solutions, that you know enough that there are many MSPs, especially when I do forensic audits, that have no more technology knowledge than the customer they're purporting to serve. So at least make sure you know how to vet the right relationships, and you have to be a generalist. Unless you start getting into 10 or 20 man shops, you have to be a generalist. The 1 to 5 MSP has to know how to bring the right services together in his portfolio, and how to manage those correctly, and how to follow the industry news and to be aware, and also be trusted enough, which is a horrible word, another marketing term we did. MSP is a marketing term. MSSP is just like when marketing got lazy and added an S. Trusted advisor was as dumb as any of them. But you really have to be someone that they look to, and you say, when I hear MSPs, as we reviewed this, they said, why wasn't this done? The customer wouldn't let me. Well, why didn't you prove your value to the customer years ago and prevent this? It's still on the MSP, in my opinion. The customer wouldn't let me do it is no excuse. If you're going to use that excuse, get into politics and just point fingers at the prior administration. You're responsible, be responsible. Make
Brian,
sure they understand.
Brian, I'm curious, right? I mean, so you consult on sales now, right? For MSPs. Do these terms even help them? Like, does a customer know what MSSP even means? Like, do you even market the word managed services provider? Like, because I would think
MSSPs know what MSSP means. It's a great term, yeah. But you know what? Cloud is a dumb marketing term too. But it's a household word now. Like, marketing verbiage is just our way of simplifying something that most of the marketplace will never truly understand, so that they have a signpost that they can point to. But what an MSP, I mean, yeah, I use MSP all the time. A managed service provider is great because what MSP does, I think what the term MSP did was it set us free from the break fix business model. Instead of saying we're going to be your retained IT, like retainer is an out of date term that doesn't work in MSP anymore. Or maybe you sell block hours, but you're not going to call yourself a block hour IT company. You're going to call yourself a managed service provider. I think it absolutely works, but like, you know, Seam comes out and it's like, wait a minute, we've been doing this forever, but now there's a word to talk about it. But this is like a really small micro piece of what it means to be cyber. So I would say, do they help? Yeah, for sure. They help in that, you know, Keith, you had a good point that you have to prove your value, but this all comes back to selling is solving a specific problem and it is communicating a very specific value. Right? You can't just be like, we're all things IT. And they go, okay, well, will you fix this? Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got it. Yeah, we got it. Being like a blanket, if it has a switch and a plug, then we'll manage it. I don't really think that's a good way of selling managed services. I think having a clear vision statement of where you take, what problem you solve and where you take people, and then what your results mechanism is becomes the how. Right? We accomplish X for people who are Y while avoiding Z, right? That's what we're trying to get to in our messaging. And these terms can be really helpful. What's not helpful is just our sales process being alphabet soup and throwing a bunch of letters at people like that. Nothing makes people hate you faster than using acronyms that they don't understand. You know, that's some of my thought there.
Yeah, the value proposition is the secret sauce. Otherwise, take out the blue light and sell commodities at the guy down. You're basically training your clients that it's checkbox. I call that, do you want the fries with that sale? Let's take out the good, better, best. Let me sell everything the guy down the street is selling. And then you're training the customer to say, well, now it's just based on, do you have a coupon? When you're talking about how am I going to align to your business specific needs? How I'm going to provide business process enhancement? How am I going to sell to your customer's customer? I'm no longer talking to the business owner and saying, I'm going to make your customer's experience better. That's how you enhance their business. All of a sudden, all the ABCs, like you called it, which was brilliant, behind the scenes, they're going like, I don't want to hear that anymore anyway, because that was hurting my brain. That has nothing to do with what I do for a living. You know, if I called my, you know, there's a guy coming today to install shelves in my house. All I want is shelves installed straight. If he said, well, I'm using a Milwaukee drill with this kind, I'm going like, I don't really give a shit. Sorry, I really don't care. It was like when I'm getting my car repaired, I think I told you, George, once the dealer went past my deductible, I don't even care about his list of parts. I want my car back so I can get my new one. That's it.
So did they actually finally fix this car? Because it's been a nightmare for you.
They ordered me a new AMG SL.
Get out.
You know what?
They're replacing the entire ride.
No, they said they'll just take a early trade-in on my lease. That car, you saw that car. I've had it for 2 years. It's time to replace it anyway.
That's a nice ride. Not gonna lie.
The nice one's really, it's got the amplified, it's the AMG package with the amplified exhaust, which who cares because I drive slow, but I could sound like I'm driving fast.
Well, that's good. I'm glad your car issues got resolved.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump into some current events. Can't help but look at our friends over at Datto actually putting new stuff out. Despite all of the recent news. I don't know if we've talked that to death, but they finally refreshed.
Never, George. There's always more to talk about.
Okay. What would you like to talk about, Darren? Please tell me.
No, it's fine. I don't want to sound like a broken record. It's interesting because, yeah, I mean, get people excited, bring out some new stuff, keep it, you know, keep them hooked in, and before it all, yeah, you know my feelings.
I'd like to hear Darren's opinion on that because I look at that and say
you may have missed Darren on the Tuesday session, but I think it's pretty clear Darren doesn't sound like he wants to stick around to find out how this all shakes out.
Yeah, I think that new announcement has nothing to do with the merger. That's
No,
like
no,
something,
that was just planned.
It doesn't at all. But if you think you're going to get people excited about, you know, about improvements only to know what is likely going to happen, I just, it's kind of like, well, we really want us to buy into this, and yeah, they want to get people in new device contracts for as long as they can, which of course, as we know, Datto has always done that, and I understand, because you get a discounted or even a free device if you do that, and that makes total sense. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just something to try to lock people in as much as they can, and let them then be subject to whatever ends up happening, which I think will be very bad.
Yeah,
Well-
I watched the webinar, and I'm not sure it's really an improvement or just a generational change based on the normal osmosis of the business. It'd be like,
Well, no, it is, but
Yeah.
it's also a motivating factor potentially to try to, get people to replace old devices and get on this new generation of stuff, presumably for a commitment, which would prevent them from easily leaving when the dust settles. So I understand it was something probably obviously long planned and nothing to specifically do with it, but it is relevant in the context of what is happening. That's all.
yeah, no, I agree with that. I was more into everything I've heard is they kind of say we're going to try to operate as a separate entity and but it's never, I've heard it, the 3 different, recordings of the executives talking. They still haven't sold me on the fact that they're operating separately. I'd like other people's opinion, but it was kind of like, here's what you want to hear, so I'm going to dance around it.
Here's what you want to hear. They could say they're all buying us AMG SL-AMGs, just for remaining partners. And I mean, it doesn't mean anything, it means absolutely nothing, because we don't know, they don't know, or can't tell us, or a combination of all of the above. And the only thing you can do in this situation is look at the facts, look at the history, look at what seems most likely to happen. And again, I have pain points with existing solutions that have been acquired under this umbrella. So I have direct experience and reason to fear, my IT glue yesterday. We have no device history because apparently it can no longer handle that load, at least for the next week. So, they decided to remove that. Sure. So that'll be like, oh, well, we've decided to remove your backup history. That'll be the, how I would interpolate that going forward, just for a week, but we'll get it back to you. Don't worry. So
there was, I saw so since we're on the topic, not trying to beat it.
George, you brought it up. I mean, if you want me to drop, I'll drop it right now.
I saw recent news. I was going through recent news. There was a LinkedIn post by a guy. I'm not going to name him, but he said, "Hey, the stock wasn't going anywhere, right? Like data wasn't growing to the point that they were supposed to be growing to show forward momentum. So, what was their outlook going as their own company versus what will be the combined company moving forward? Like, do they have a better chance, right? And so from a financial standpoint, this guy was talking, and I mean, like, there is some truth to what he was saying. The stock price was below the IPO; it hadn't gone anywhere for a long while. Like, where is the upswing? Where were they going?
No, and that's a valid point. I mean, it's a business, and we all understand they're going to do what's best. They're doing what's best potentially for the business, not what's best for the customers, us as partners of the business. I mean, it's very clear. These are, liquidity events that are ultimately why people invest in things, and why lots of people also work for these companies and then ultimately move on too, which is another thing.
I mean, if you go backwards in time, and I'm not knocking the guy, but Austin McCord did bring this outside money in, right? That started this process. I mean, Vista Equity is the company that owns 70% of the shares that are also, so ultimately they're getting their money out that they invested in earlier, right? I mean, in the big scheme, the company could, I mean, somebody like an Elon Musk could have came along and just took the whole thing private. I mean,
by the way, I'm glad you brought that up, because I related it to the Twitter. I think when we talked about Twitter, I said they have to make the sale. I think I mentioned in that one, a friend of mine who does finances said, this is the best deal they're ever going to get. Especially when I looked at it. I mean, I wasn't a big social media stat guy. Twitter's minute compared to
It's true.
TikTok or Facebook or something
It's
going
true.
on.
They're
And you're
going. They're
going,
actually kind of trending downwards.
Twitter has
Yeah.
been stagnant. Yeah, I mean, and it's absolutely. I mean, that's the only deal in town, so they've got to take it. So it's just I can't fault the situation for it being what it is. However, I don't have to stick around to see what happens, and that's something that we all need to make our own choices on. But at least for backup, as I made clear previously, that's my biggest concern. So
yeah, my point, you're more patient than I'm just tired of getting a call every few months that says, you got too good of a contract with IT Glue. What can we do to move you to this one that sucks? And that was a Reader's Digest version. I keep telling them the same thing, but say, by the way, quit calling me. I don't do contracts. There's another guy in my company who does contracts. Call him. That's what he's paid for. And it's just like, it's almost the point.
I can imagine that's a tough. I mean, I'm not trying to, have empathy for the sales guy in Miami trying to sell
Join
you
you
a
for a few
contract.
minutes. I'm still.
Go ahead, Ann. Ann, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if my I was talking to somebody else. I don't know if my microphone picked that up, but
No worries.
yeah, interesting news on the the data. Yeah, 5 comes after 4, so I think this is just a planned release. And I think that data, half the businesses, or for the combined unit, half the business is BDR. So that's.
I think you're right. I think BDR is still the majority of their revenue, and then like the other 50% is SaaS backup, is some of the new security stuff they have, networking, RMM, PSA, right? I mean, even when Autotask merged with Datto, like there were this much of the combined company, really, if you look at it. So,
Yeah.
Someone else told me that.
Square pegs don't fit into round holes. That's the bottom line here. I mean, no matter what they want to say, it's just.
I definitely think the idea was the industry was rolling these things up. I mean, Kaseya is the perfect example of what was happening. And then they just needed to be able to offer a more rounded solution. The promise was integration. I mean, Darren, you bought into most of the Autotask story. Did you feel like you got the integration between their own products?
We'll say, look, we love Datto RMM.
Forget new. I'm talking about up until this point. Did the promise of integration between their products happen?
I couldn't answer that properly, to be honest. I don't know. I think probably yes, but I may not be fully qualified to answer that from the perspective that you're looking at.
You're saying you don't have all of them, so you don't know how all the pieces fit.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, but I mean, I don't think that was. I don't know that even matters very much to many people. If things are working standalone, there's like, for example, single sign-on. Obviously, yeah, we want you to log into your RMM and your backup at the same with the same login. And I said, well, I'd actually rather have a separate login.
Let me throw this out there, and I think you kind of said this on the last call. I just want to confirm. So if you're going to move your backup business away, let's assume, but you have your PSA RMM with them, you didn't sound as concerned to move those pieces, the non-customer facing pieces, as you were the backup piece.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct, because one, those are heavier lifts and much heavier lifts, and I don't worry about it as much from the being that it's a tools and systems we use. I just need to be able to not have to tell my clients, I'm sorry, well, because of a maintenance window, we can't get your backups for a week or a month, or we lost them, which is ultimately what I fear will happen. So
I think there's another dynamic, George, that maybe is not being discussed yet.
Let's hear it.
Really,
What is it?
the whole first of all, the backup and RMMs are being heavily looked at by insurance and regulators. Heavily.
Wow.
There's a question on the encryption, where all the data is stored. Can you meet FIPS guidelines? Now, it starts with government, and then it kind of goes to who's dealing with government. If you read some of the reporting regulations, it starts talking about anyone in these industries, and you're going, there's not a really firm line on what's regulated. let's go next to RMMs, where they're now saying you need to regulate PowerShell commands and so on, which right now, and I don't know if you're technical, George, I mean, I don't want to offend anyone, but you really can't lock down the console and just say, just run these commands. Microsoft has not provided a great way to do that.
I think there are ways via scripting to disable PowerShell.
Right, in its entirety.
Yeah.
I'm saying like, but selectively RMM, some of them rely on PowerShell commands in the background. So anyway, they're coming under scrutiny. They're coming under scrutiny of people that will not get as deep into it as many of the people on the call that understand technology. Remember, these are insurance underwriters, government bureaucrats that just hear RMMs cause breaches, they're bad. So I think there's going to be reinventing of the tool set, which may be some fear.
Well, there have absolutely been people saying, do I even need the traditional RMM anymore? Microsoft has it all, or whatever, or Apple. But do you see a day, like in the short future, where the insurance people are going to have the vendor go through a validation process in order to ensure the MSP?
I think right now, and I've said this to people, and it gets bad PR. I kind of work with Carl on his group because I do believe there's changes coming. I say to people, in the first run of everything I'm hearing by visiting Sacramento, working with the majority leader, I think I have some good insight to square. They're leaning towards a model of attorneys because that's what they understand. I'm not saying it's right, and people misunderstand me when I say that. They understand, go to school, get a degree, pass a test, get a license, continuing education, and the state regulates you. That's how they do attorneys. That's how they do contractors. That's how they do hairdressers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to think that unless we raise our hand and get in the game, and that's what insurance companies are pushing for. They don't like this liability they're getting. The cost of remediating a cyber security, I don't even think you're supposed to call it breach anymore. Event, I think is the new term they use. Yeah, you're supposed to report an event, which is kind of hard to figure out what that actually means. But the insurance companies are saying this costs us too much money. Premiums are already very high for the smaller businesses and maybe out of reach or uninsurable. And so the insurance companies are looking for someone to put the blame on. And that's why I've told you that before when they asked me to be a professional witness or do a forensic audit. The angle of the insurance company is precisely one thing. How do I not pay this claim? Same thing as when you have a car accident. We're not unique, right? You flood your house with water and they make sure your kid didn't bring a hose in the upstairs window. That's what they do for a living, and they're experts at it. So I think there's a possibility it'll go where you're saying. We want your, and right now we think we can write something in our MSA that says, by the way, we have cyber insurance, but it doesn't affect you. And we think that'll work. Your friend, the Bradley, the brilliant attorney, which I'm not, disagrees with my perspective on it, but that's fine. I mean, that's what people do. I don't think that means a hill means a difference. He does. He's the attorney. I'm not. So take your advice where you should.
We're gonna go backwards from how things get litigated, I think. But yeah, let's go through a couple of quick current events. So Apple law, there was this, right to repair, law that got kind of pushed through. So now Apple, almost like a car parts department, is basically selling Apple tools and Apple parts for their products. So now you're not forced to go to Apple directly. You could go to Anywhere, right? And then those Anywhere people, like the YouFixit places or whatever, could buy their parts directly from Apple, kind of like the auto dealership. Interesting. I mean, I don't know if a lot of MSPs are going to go into the Apple fixing, business, but at least you can get it now rather than third-party parts. So that's at least Apple put out the ability for you to do that. I think you guys probably saw PAX 8 announce that in May they're launching their partnership with AWS, and obviously there's a lot of ways to get that, of course, direct. But
No, I think, by the way, just to interrupt, I think that's huge. Because I think Pax8 always delivers, in my opinion, a product card that they add value to what we don't get when we go direct.
yeah.
I think they're going to help us navigate a tough landscape.
Yeah, I mean, they're launching it now. I haven't even heard the particulars, but I'm sure something, there's going to be a wrinkle in there, right? In terms of how you're going to be able to buy through Pax8 versus direct and what that benefit is. We'll find out. But they definitely
I just want to.
go it live.
No, I just wanted to say.
And Ken will owe me a drink for saying that, but we'll leave that.
I'm sure he'll buy you a drink no matter what. But go ahead.
No, just in the notion of Pax8 adding value. Just as an aside, I attended yesterday a security event hosted by Pax8 regarding 365 stuff, which was excellent and just a good example of that. Taking something that they're one of their biggest offerings, obviously their biggest, and adding, hey, here's some things, here's some tips and tricks to help secure it.
I think
And
Matt Lee was running that session, right? And
Matt Lee was running it, and it was excellent. So that's a great value add example right there.
Awesome. Well, I'm curious to see what comes a part of their launch, but it definitely launches in a couple of weeks. So we'll see. But definitely Amazon is finally taking a hard approach on partners, where before it was kind of more direct to the IT department, direct to the consumer from an AWS standpoint. So we'll see if that piece swings people the other way, right? Do they do Amazon versus Google Azure? I don't know, but we will see. This has been happening for a few weeks now. I don't know what's going on, but Google has put out a lot of 0-day updates for Chrome. I would say Chrome is probably the default, the most used browser, at least in domestically. So there seems to be a lot of, please update your Chrome every day. I have to update my Chrome right now. So there you go.
And by the way, that and the biggest target of Microsoft, in my opinion, with Edge. I mean, it's definitely obvious what Microsoft's going over with Edge. They're going after Chrome. It's the same type of browser.
It's a Chromium browser, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm an iPhone guy. I'm a Microsoft everything else. So apparently the iPhone 14 is dramatically more expensive.
Wow.
I don't know why, but it is.
That'd be the first time Apple's done, Apple generally gives upgrades without ink. I mean, you look at new MacBooks, new iPhones, it's always been in the same price point. Yeah, that is an interesting story.
It's a pretty big jump at $200 in additional price at each tier, so that you don't have a bezel anymore. Looks like the screen is just like cut out for the two holes. So
wow,
there
cool.
it is.
Could that be manufacturing and materials related?
I mean, it could definitely be supply chain things too, right? Like
maybe they're just leaning on everybody does anything that we say, so let's just transfer the price through.
Yeah,
could be that.
Do you there was political talk years ago about Apple agreeing to bring some production into the United States. Did that ever occur? Did that
never happened? They were talking about a Foxconn plant in Wisconsin. It never happened.
That's what it was.
Still all manufactured over in Asia. And then lastly, good, bad, or indifferent, sounds like Google will now take requests to remove phone numbers, addresses, personal email accounts, from their search engine results. So tens of thousands of requests annually, and they only have been approving 13%. So it looks like they're going to be willing to go up on that. So that way people can't get your phone number that's never changed in probably 20 years there, Keith. So that's cool that you can kind of delist your stuff so that people can't get to you as easily. Not that your number is posted anywhere there, buddy. So, that's pretty much the stuff that I saw coming up in the feed that was interesting. Still a lot of acquisition stuff going back and forth, but by companies that don't necessarily fit in our space. I didn't bring them up today. And that, ultimately, as the needle moves on, right, and you hear bits and pieces come out from, some of the like I think Fred came out today at a Kaseya event in Florida and talked again about the Datto thing. So I don't think this Datto thing is going away, but I did see that Datto was pushing DattoCon. So it looks like DattoCon will live for September. That event is happening in DC. There was a lot of speculation on whether they would still do it now that the announcement is out. Looks like they're going to. So I don't know how many of you are planning to go, but it looks like that event is on.
If we talk about events, years and years ago, I went to an Aruba event in Vegas, and at that event,
Okay, Aruba, the networking company.
yeah, at that event, they announced to everyone who was like big Aruba had a culture of its own. They announced, we just got gobbled up by HP. If you remember that, made a bunch of promises, and no one's leaving, everything's gonna be the same. Where within 6 months after that, we saw people leaving, which is the normal migration. You have a 6 month to 1 year stay, and all of a sudden, Aruba's not who it was when it was not part of HP.
That's kind of that's been Darren's point the whole time, right? Like,
Just
hey,
look at the history. Almost every single situation, but particularly with this one, I mean, it's just not good.
And
Yeah.
it's almost like I relate it to, you deal with your kids. How long am I going to be stupid enough to fall for the same line? And that's kind of my Reader's Digest version of what I hear Darren saying. We've been through this before, so why do we fall for it now?
And I look at it, it's, I make the same mistakes. I have some behaviors that, I know things I have to change, and I think it'll be any different if it's always the same. It's like, I know what I have to do to fix something, but guess what? The result always ends up being the same. And we all have certain things that we do that with. And this is just a bigger, greater example of that. I mean, there's no, again, pre-IPO, they're in a, Fred was very vocal last year. They were going to be IPO by the end of the year if that event didn't happen. And I'm sure they'll be, as soon as this closes, that'll be #1 on the list, and, push the revenue and don't look back, because after that, it doesn't matter as much for the people at the very top. So anyway, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, they're and all of us are in our business to make money. So you're going like, we kind of get that. It's like, I'm not here to save the world.
So do you think Fred is going to present at the main stage of DattoCon?
I think he has to.
He has to.
Well, it would be closed
They
by
have
then,
to
right?
jointly, in my opinion.
No, they're saying Q4. Data's in September. It's
Okay.
Q3.
I think they need to, in my opinion, I think, and I'm not a marketing guy, we should ask the marketing genius that's on the call. My opinion is they have to go to that event and kind of show in some way we're all together. We're all, we are all
one happy family.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about, because we are all together. We're one big happy family, and look how we get along, and how, I'm committed to leaving Datto to be the company you've always understood it to be. And I'm just over here investing money because I'm a good guy.
Ryan, I'll give you the last thought, and then let people know how to find you online, and we'll close it up for today.
Sure. I'll start by saying that most of what I have to say about the merger, I don't think is going to add anything new. I think, Darren, I'll say I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. It doesn't make sense to get our feelings hurt that a business made a really great business move, but it does make sense for us to take stock of how it will affect us, right? And then make those decisions accordingly. There's a lot of people get on the internet, get so weird, and they're mad at a CEO they're mad at an investment fund for selling a business that they bought 5 years ago from private. Like, that's their job, but the programmer culture that Datto really came up in, right? It was such a bro culture for so long that then the outside money comes in, and a lot of that changed, but they're still giving away, Series box shaped chocolate bars a couple years ago, right? And I think that Datto culture has to evolve, which will ultimately mean that Datto sales resources for like the Datto sales team that kind of outsources and helps the MSP sell, that culture and process has to evolve. It's going to bring in the Kaseya sort of like for the jugular kind of sales methodology that they have.
A great way to put it, Brian. I have to say it's a good analogy.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. So of course that will change, but what I will add, I know it's not to go long, what I will add that might be a new thought is if you're an MSP and you're like, I am in the weeds on this PSA, I can't change my tech stack right now, but I'm afraid or I'm concerned. It's just a thought that rather than trying to hide this from the customer, is it possible to bring the customer into this narrative and let the customer be a fellow spectator in what will ultimately be a very defining, I think, acquisition in our industry? It has the potential to actually change the way that managed services happens as a whole. You know, as this conversation of is an RMM even a part of our tech stack in 4 years? We might not we might be talking about RMMs like we talk about network hubs. You know, it might be completely an out-of-date idea. We don't really know. So is it possible that we go to our customers and say, hey, I don't know if this matters to you in the news, but a really big company that we're all probably going to work for one day just bought another really big company. And here's what that might mean for you and I. That might mean the best thing I can do right now is to not tumultuously change your service offering. There's some possibility of some ripples. And so we're going to go ahead and get triplicates of some of your backup. I'd like to go ahead and build these service hours so that we can set up, you know, maybe we say, I'd like to put a plan in place. I've got a guy working overtime. If you'd like, I can go ahead and get some stuff set up. I can get another thing in another cloud that isn't Kaseya's, just in case this whole thing, you know, crumbles. And it's possible then that we bring them in and don't, you know, to inverse what I call the adversarial sales complex, that ultimately it is the us versus our customers, and that revenue is the desired outcome. But instead it is us and our customers versus the customer's problem, and the customer's problem becomes the villain. And ultimately this is not just our problem. It really is our customer's problem. And so what if we told them there is a risk of a problem that is completely greater than me? If you go to any other MSP, they're going to say the same thing. There's 14,000 Datto users or whatever, you know, in whatever the case, whatever that number is. So it may be a way of de-stressing it for us by just sort of making it more of a community's concern. You know, this is a B2B issue, not an MSP issue.
It's a very, very good point. I want to just add one thing, you know, use the word mad, and I'm not mad at all. It's disappointed is the word to me that would be more relevant here.
Right.
Because I get the business situation, but there's a big difference between those words. So that's how I look at it. So.
Totally. Well, those are some of my thoughts, George.
How do people find you online, Brian?
Yeah, feelgoodmsp.com. I run a workshop every month. I'm running my $1 Million MSP workshop where I teach the 7-step plan to scale to 7 figures in May. And registration's already open.
Watch out. There's domain names already for 7-figure XYZ.
Well, sure. Yeah. He's doing a great job. Nothing to do with that. But this is how to scale to 7 figures, which is a term much bigger than any one company. And this is how I scale the 6-figure MSP to a 7-figure MSP using the 7 steps that I teach.
Not affiliated.
Someday we'll share with Brian the car story. This is
we're absolutely going to share with him the car story.
And since he's so close to where I'm at, you know, I'd like to sometime offline we could hook up and
sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to join you guys at some point, perhaps, you know, to head up a little north for that one.
Yeah. Let's do that.
We bring people together on this. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time live, 24 hours a day online. MSPinitiative.com under sessions. You'll find it all. Put it in your podcast, video, whatever you like. Brian, thank you for coming online. Everyone else, see you on the next one. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.